Okay, and welcome back. Hour number 2. Joel Skousen is with us. Joel is with us a couple of times a month to add his own unique view of the world through his weekly newsletter called World Affairs Brief. We'll tell you how to get a free complimentary copy of that during the hour as well. Much is happening out there. We are trying our best to sort it out and present it to you in a logical, sequential format. There's some strange statements being made by a lot of people who don't seem to have their heads glued on quite right. It's bizarre. It's quite a show. Joel, welcome back. Thank you for being here. Ukraine is obviously on top of the ticket. Let us know how you see it.
Well, this is the second time now in 6 months that they've signed a truce. Both of them have been outright shams. They've basically given Russia everything they want in terms of total autonomy, first of all, of Donetsk and the other
Luhansk
areas, and now they've gone to the two southern areas.
Well, they're after Mariupol. Right.
That's right. They're after Mariupol, which is, of course, the major port leading to Crimea. It supplies about half of the goods through ports to Crimea. The other one is a little further south, which is their next target, I think. So here's what we have. We have the West continuing to show complete permissiveness, granting Russia what they want, and then the so-called separatists, which Russia still to this day claims that we don't control and we don't help, and we have nothing to do. I mean, Putin continues not. They negotiate with Putin on this thing. He refuses to sign them, because signing them the truce would indicate that I'm involved. And yet, they continue to get more weapons. The truce is a sham. The fighting continues. It never stopped the last September one, and it hasn't stopped now.
Well, Poroshenko went to the UAE on a shopping trip and apparently came away with some substantial weapons. No one is saying exactly what he got, but I guess his shopping trip was not in vain.
Well, I think it's a sham as well. Look, new weapons require training. You got to get at least 6 months to a year in these weapons to train troops. Generals in the Ukraine continue to complain that the central government continues to sabotage their campaigns. They aren't given the troops that they need. They exist. They aren't given what equipment they have. And they continue to have, major defections. And a lot of it is smacks of what happened in Red China when Mao Zedong took over. Of course, the U.S. Continued to force Chiang Kai-shek into an agreement or a truce with Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong continued to get arms from Russia, and the U.S. cut off arms to Chiang Kai-shek. And then the U.S. wonders, why are all the nationalist Chinese troops defecting?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you knew that, the Russian side was getting more and more weapons and you were going to eventually get annihilated, you'd defect too. And that's exactly what is happening in Ukraine. It bolsters my long-term opinion, and I've held here, is that the Poroshenko government is, in fact, not a pro-Western government. This was not a pro-Western coup. This was a false coup, just like the fall of the Soviet Union was a carefully crafted deception. And Poroshenko, whose best friends are Russian oligarchs, is sabotaging this war on behalf of Russia. And he's going now for bailouts, of course, from Europe. That's the only thing that they want. But, if Europe wanted to stop Putin in his tracks, they'd simply put fast reaction forces into Ukraine and dare them to go ahead and attack Western forces. Mm-hmm. They're not going to do that because they don't want to provoke World War III yet, because it's too early. Russia isn't ready yet. And so what we're really seeing here is the globalists who want this war, but they have to wait until Russia does it. And so what they do is they react in a permissive manner. They talk about sanctions. They are simply token sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
They're hitting a few, half a dozen oligarchs or buddies of Putin, who is, by the way, the most wealthy man in the world now. When he became president, when he became president, worth over $400 billion. He became president the second time.
Wow.
He named himself head of a company that takes a cut on every single business deal, has been for the past 8 years. Every business deal that comes into Russia from foreign, he gets a cut. And, you talk about corruption. This is a story, of course, that isn't been aired in the press because they continue to, protect Putin while they, appear to decry him. I mean, this is a master double entendre deceit going on. The Russians playing a deceitful game, and the West playing as if they're fighting Putin or upset with Putin, but they give in every time. They continue to be permissive with Russia because
Joel, what should the West do militarily? Should we arm Kiev with so-called lethal weapons?
No. Arming Kiev isn't going to do any good when Kiev works for Russia. All that would do would be to give sensitive technology to Russia. It's all going to end up in Russian hands. The only way to stop Putin, if you really wanted to stop him, would be the same way you could have stopped Hitler in World War II. You put troops in there to guard Poland, in this case, to guard thing, and you just start to push the separatists out. And then you make Putin show his hand. Is he going to attack directly the Western forces? I don't think so. He's not ready to do that yet. But the fact that the West knows what to do, will not do that, indicates that they don't want to stop Putin. They know this is the
Go ahead.
This is a prelude to World War III, 5 years off, probably. It's going to take Putin a while to go through Ukraine. It took him a year to take the first 2 provinces. He's going to take another year and a half to take another 3 provinces. He won't go all the way through western Ukraine. I'm predicting he'll take on the Baltic states after this. You'll start to see unrest in the millions of Russians that they moved into the Baltic states. And I had a daughter who lived in Estonia. She knows how bad the relationships are between Russians and Estonians and the Estonians. They hate each other, and they're segregated. And the Russians keep complaining that they're second-class citizens. I can see this starting all over again in the Balkans. And you mark my predictions. You'll see the West not stand up. They'll continue to pontificate, talk about sanctions, but none of these sanctions are effective. I mean, if the
Well, they seem to be hurting the EU and Eastern Europe countries more than anyone else.
Well, no, the reason that, look, the reason they're not, I mean, the only reason that Putin is hurting is because he's hurt himself. None of those sanctions did anything until Putin cut off all imports from Europe. Once he did that, all the investment from Europe dried up in Russia, and that's when the banks started to have real problems. But you see, Putin himself now plays upon this additional crisis by pumping up the people that Europe and the United States are the fault of our problems, when in fact it was Putin's unilateral decision to cut off all trade with Europe. And even the oil problem, people keep saying, well, the U.S. is trying to hurt Russia and Venezuela and all these other communist countries by jacking or taking down the price. They didn't take down the price of oil. In fact, nobody has increased production except the United States, and the United States is the only production that is not controlled by the government. The U.S. can't up or down production. They can stop new development, as they have. They're still keeping oil fields, major oil fields as big as Saudi Arabia, capped in the Arctic to keep oil off the market, but they can't stop the fracking. It's all private, independent companies. I mean, even the globalist-tied oil companies don't have a majority stake in the new oil production fields. These are the small independents that are making a killing. And they've already invested in money in fracking. They're not about to stop. While they're stopping new drilling. New drilling is down about 80% in many of these areas, like North Dakota and Utah, eastern Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. But the existing wells, they've already put the investment in. They're going to keep pumping, and the price of oil is going to stay relatively low for a while.
Okay, there seems to be an awful lot of play acting going on in Ukraine, in Kiev, with Poroshenko and Ratsenyuk and the others. What did he go to the UAE for? What's all this faux purchasing of armor about? What I don't get it.
There's no purchasing of arms.
So that was all a lie.
Yeah, I mean, there's no money to purchase.
Well, I was wondering where he was getting the money, but that was secondary to the story. The story claimed he got it no matter what.
Yeah, if he got it at all, it's because It's because Russia whispered in UAE ear and said, give him some weapons. We'll make it look like he's getting weapons from the West.
Okay, battlefield analysis. The Ukraine army has not done well. Debaltsevo, they got their clocks cleaned, and one of the top commanders, I don't know what his rank was, he was a middle-brow commander there, said that the withdrawal was unorganized. Basically, they fled, and otherwise they would have lost hundreds more troops. They were just being smashed flat by the separatist artillery, which 400 pieces, I guess, have been pulled out so far, allegedly. We don't know what to believe there, actually.
Well, look, I'll tell you, artillery is not something that non-military separatists learn to do with that kind of accuracy.
I wouldn't think so.
These are professional Russian troops in there.
Mm-hmm.
This is an open invasion now. All of this equipment came across the border from Russia.
Okay, they pulled the artillery back. Let's just say if what they're saying is true, 400 pieces.
After they already won.
Yeah, well, they won.
So they already drove the Ukrainians, and now they can afford to pull back.
Yeah, Ukraine
for a time, but then they're not leaving, no.
Understood. Ukraine is not withdrawing yet because they say there's still shots being fired at them, so they're sitting put. Will the separatists have to roll their artillery back into place here? If Ukraine will not withdraw, if Kiev says, no, we're not withdrawing because we're now getting UK help, advisors are coming over to teach and train, we're going to be stronger, we're going to sit right there, we have to protect...
Look, this is just tokenism. Yes, there's some token Western mercenaries, there's the token advisors, but none of this means anything. All this is meant is to feed the propaganda machine that the West is interfering and trying to, somehow...
And yet the West
is right.
Correct, Joel. And yet the West propaganda machine is saying the opposite.
Well, of course, they're saying this is Russian aggression, and it is. That's not the point.
Okay.
The point is they're doing nothing to stop it.
They being...
That's the point.
They being Obama, Cameron,
the West.
Hollande. Yes,
sure,
Hollande, Obama, Cameron.
Look, Angela Merkel's a former East German communist.
Right.
You don't know what side she's on.
I don't know. Yeah.
But it's like Tony Blair was an outright Marxist, and he played the role of a globalist the whole time.
He certainly did.
Whether or not he's switching sides or playing one side, you never know in the European country. You look at from Helmut Kohl to all of these German chancellors, and they were in bed with East German spies all during their campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But you really don't know, because many times the globalists like Henry Kissinger go and join the East German Communist Party, so that when he becomes the top leader in the U.S., the communists think he's one of us.
Mm-hmm.
It was like Alger Hiss went and joined the Communist Party.
That's funny.
But he was a globalist, joined the communists thinking that he was one of them, so that as he facilitated communists, they wouldn't question.
Got it.
And so this is the globalists playing a very sophisticated double deception.
It is.
Double agents.
No, it is. It's a two-pronged, two-faced media campaign, and the average individual, I don't think, can wrap their minds around what's really going on here like you can.
There's no way that they can understand this because everybody's lying. Everybody's covering up for what's really going on.
Right.
And so the bottom line is this. Anglo-American globalists are predators. They're out to take away our sovereignty, get us into a war, and justify global new world, militarized global government. They need Russia and China to attack. That's the only thing that explains why they've been building up Russia and China, giving them everything, bringing communists to power in Cuba, in Nicaragua, sure, they've overthrown a communist in Allende in Chile that they didn't authorized to come into power. They overthrew Arbenz in Guatemala, but those were peanuts compared to the major agenda of building communist governments, keeping them in power, not letting them be undermined. But they still have to play as if they're anti-communist. They have to play as if they're anti-Putin. The bottom line is they're still buying oil from Putin. The bottom line is they're still buying rocket engines from Putin. And they're discouraging American competitors to in rocket engines to Russia.
Correct. Now,
And
what about...
yeah.
Go on. Go ahead.
They still have other secret weapons deals.
Mm-hmm.
They're still shipping military technology to China via Israel. Israel is the conduit.
Mm-hmm.
Israel sells U.S. military technology to China all the time, and that gets to Russia, and Russia gets, the Chinese have stolen a tremendous amount of material, including the plans to the F-35, and it's already showing up in Russian airplanes and in Chinese airplanes. And the U.S. could shut that down, but they're not. They're playing as if there's nothing that we can do. Well, sure, they put all that stuff out online. Who would put all the plans to the F-35 accessible to online? There's just no need for that. But they did it. So this time that they're fighting, the bottom line is that they're disarming, even when there's no need to, even when Russia and
when you
China
say they, you're talking about
Obama, the
Obama.
United States are disarming. And, the military is really up in arms because they see that Russia and China are real military threats, and there's no preparations to take on. The Pacific Command continues to play the single card as we want more military exchanges with China. We want to show that we're moderate, that they're moderate, and we want to pave the way no matter what China does, no matter how egregious with Vietnam, its former ally, with the Philippines, with Japan. All the U.S. can respond is, we want them to abide by international, but in the meantime, we're going to have more military exchanges with China. Just utterly ludicrous. And I think this isn't going to change. We're going to see this go on for several more years.
Uh-huh. So Ukraine will be continually embroiled in fighting. It's not going to stop.
Right, but I don't think they'll actually take over Western Ukraine until...
I don't think they want it, do you?
Well, that's right. They don't want to take up this economic basket case. They want the EU to bail.
Let the IMF wrestle with it. No, they don't want
Remember, that's why Russia faked their own demise in 1990 and 91, is so that the West could pick up the tab, so that to open Western trade. Look who built up the entire Russian oil industry. It was Western oil companies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, Russia is this, and they're still in there today, even in the sanctions. The oil companies have not pulled out of Russia. And that tells you these are phony sanctions.
Okay. Meanwhile, Russia is announcing their R&D continues. They're talking about their next generation 100-ton ICBM, which is supposed to be fully mocked up here in the next couple of months.
Very dangerous missile. It's going to replace the SS-18.
Satan. Yeah, it looks like a big advance forward. A lot of spoofing going on with incoming warheads. They are really, really moving forward. And we're not building anything. What are we doing? We're shooting off our Minuteman missiles, reducing that inventory.
We've just taken all the 3 warheads off the Minuteman IIIs and replaced them with one single warhead. That's a
Who ordered that?
Barack Obama.
That's a 2/3, 66% reduction in our military readiness, period.
That's right.
Our defenses have just been whacked by Barack Obama. Are we going to survive this guy 2 more years?
Well, remember that it's not Barack Obama.
Oh, I understand.
He did not invent that order. The globalists handling him told him to do this,
Understood.
and he gave the order. Yeah.
Understood. Talking about the people who are making his mouth move. What are we going to do? Are we going to survive these people, the controllers?
Well, I can tell you they're going to give you a controlled Republican in 2016, and he's going to continue the same policies. Mm-hmm. And it will prove to people once and for all, what I've been saying is right. It doesn't matter what political party is. They only give you controlled presidents. George W. Bush was
ever since JFK.
Yeah. Now, Ronald Reagan was an anomaly.
Well, he tried.
They did not intend for Ronald Reagan to get elected, but once he did get the nomination, they made that famous deal with the 3 network leaders with him. For us to treat you fairly in the press, you've got to take George H.W. Bush as your vice president, let him control personnel in the White House. And they did, but he still fought back, and that's why they threw that assassination attempt. They don't like to do that. It gets messy. These require a lot of cover-ups. I mean, look at this guy, John Hinckley, Jr., son of one of the best friends of the vice president, disappears for 2 years, goes underground, only surfaces once to go visit a psychiatrist to make up his bona fides about having mental problems, and then does this assassination. And the media refuses to talk about the relationship between John Hinckley Sr. and the vice president. Too good to be true.
Wow. Okay, all true. Now, we just have a minute or two until the break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about this immigration issue. I think you probably saw the federal Obama-appointed judge's ruling about the border, which basically said, we have no border, we have no policy, come on over. I mean, it just removed all barriers, release all
you must release all of them.
all detained illegals.
Ludicrous.
Yeah. Now, how can we continue to function as an alleged sovereign nation with no border? And if that judge's decision is allowed to stand, we have no border.
But, you know, this is the way that they've overturned this immigration thing for years. It was the judges that decided that babies dropped in the United States of non-citizens become citizens. It was purely a judge's ruling.
Yeah.
That it was never.
Yeah, the whole anchor baby thing, you're correct.
No other country does that. It was the California Supreme Court judges which ruled that you can't cut off funding, you know, for illegal aliens to hospital care and public education and welfare benefits. And now the IRS coming out, you know, giving super refunds to illegal aliens.
Unbelievable.
You know,
Unbelievable.
Just an unstoppable agenda, this multicultural agenda. And the only benefit to it is that with all this terrorism the U.S. is engendering around the world, there hasn't been a single terrorist cross the United States border from Mexico. Why? Because the orders are, we don't want to do that. If you start having terrorism in the southern part of the United States, people are going to demand that border get sealed, and that will get in the way of the agenda of bringing in illegal aliens. Our big problem now is aliens from the Muslim world coming in at over 200,000 a year. The U.S. is going to build ourselves our
Well,
own
100,000 a month total. I don't know how many ultimately are of Muslim derivation, but there are a lot of them. 7 million Muslims in this country now, not remotely interested in assimilating. None of these new alien groups are Asian, doesn't matter. Latino, they're staying amongst themselves. We'll be back in a minute with Joel to talk more about this. Hold on. Okay, back with Joel Skousen. If you'd like a free complimentary copy, pardon the redundancy there, complimentary means free, all you have to do is write to Joel at editor@worldaffairsbrief, editor@worldaffairsbrief.com, and ask him for a copy, and he'll send one to you, and you can subscribe to it thereafter if you find it to your liking. It is always full of fascinating analysis, agree or disagree, the more you listen to. And when you hear things you don't agree with, you grow. And that's what we've always said here on this program. Last Friday, Obama appointee, U.S. Federal District Court Judge in the District of Columbia, ruled that even the efforts undertaken by the administration to stem the flood of illegals could not continue. Now, here's a man appointed by Obama ruling against him. Do you buy that, folks? If upheld, that ruling will ensure that in addition to amnesty for illegals already here, efforts to deter future surges across the border may be doomed. Judge Boasberg, B-O-A-S-B-E-R-G, Boasberg, ruled that the government could no longer detain illegals that have crossed the border, whether or not they apply for asylum. Let me repeat that. The judge ruled that the government could no longer detain illegals that have crossed the border, whether or not they apply for asylum. Though the massive wave of illegal immigrants, including tens of thousands of unaccompanied children from Central America, was set off in no small measure by the perception that the administration would give them amnesty, to its credit, the Department of Homeland Security belatedly tried to send the opposite message out by imprisoning those who crossed the border, detaining them. those who crossed the border illegally, even if they claimed they were subjected to persecution back at home. The government was seeking to make it clear that those who were caught must expect to be detained and then sent back home. But Judge Boasberg heeded the pleas of the ACLU, the pink ACLU, and apparently decided to issue his ruling, certainly with their behalf in mind. Now, where are we with this? We have no border. We have no policy. What the judge said is you can't detain anybody, no matter what the reason, if they come across the border. And you can't send them home. So what do we got here?
Well, we've got an excuse, of course, for the Obama administration to go full speed ahead against Judge Hanson, who ruled that it was, unconstitutional for the administration, and that was a correct ruling to say that granting amnesty is, in fact, not within the power of the president. It's not a matter of failure to enforce. He's doing a positive act by giving them green cards. That's much different than simply failing to deport. And, one thing that I'm surprised at, of course, is the Obama administration had let, in January, several $1 million worth of contracts to start fulfilling the process of these green cards. And I had suspected that they were going to actually do this, under the table, so that by the time the DHS funding bill came to a crisis, as it has this week, that it would already be a done deal. Apparently that is not true. It's taken them longer to get those green cards printed and ready to go. And so what we're finding is that Mitch McConnell has led the way by backing down and simply giving up the battle to stop the Department of Homeland Security from issuing the green cards and the non-deportation orders. The big question is, how long will Boehner hold out until he sells out again, like he did in the government shutdown fight, without ever truly countering any of the propaganda by the president about the government shutdown? So I'm not optimistic that we're going to win this battle, even with Republicans in control. In fact, it was interesting.
Well, I concur. I mean, it's as I've said before, it's a bicycle wheel. I don't care where you are on it; it always ends up in the same place.
Here's the interesting byline by the Christian Science Monitor, a real pro-government newspaper. They said, the reason Mitch McConnell had to compromise is because he needs 6 Democrats to override a presidential veto, so he has got to at least be moderate. And secondly, he's got to worry about not losing his new majority in the next election. So you see, it doesn't matter if you win.
Right.
You've got the press will give them an excuse for compromising because they've got to maintain their majority, and they're going to lose it if they don't compromise. Here they're elected to overcome these compromises, and they use the threat of losing that majority the next election to compromise. Mm-hmm. Very, very slick.
Ted Cruz, and I believe he flew over in McConnell's private jet with McConnell, made his homage to Israel. Apparently he is, along with Rand Paul, spoken to daily by Israeli sources, and this is, I had a big article about that today. Rand Paul gets an awful lot of instruction, shall we say, from his Israeli friends. It doesn't make me feel any better. How do you feel about that?
Well, the Israeli government is in bed with the globalists. It is not.
Well, they are the globalists to a degree. Yeah.
Well, I really don't think the Jews run the globalist New World Order. There's a lot of Jews in it.
Well, let's call them Bolshevik Zionists and not Jews. I'm more comfortable with that.
That's right. They are left-wing globalist people. In fact, remember that labor Zionism that took over the Aliyah of the immigration of Jews during World War II was a communist organization, far left, Marxist communist organization. Really hijacked the religious Zionism that became the minority. And ever since then, of course, they have now switched to the globalist side. And this is it's like Barack Obama starts out as a Marxist. A lot of people think he's still a communist. He isn't. He was bought out, sold out to the globalists, and became a globalist. They don't make communist political organizers wealthy. Obama's worth over $16 million today. And he's never earned over $60,000 in his life until he became a U.S. Senator just a few years ago. And this is the same way with, Benjamin Netanyahu.
We're in the wrong business.
Protege.
Yeah.
I mean, they set him up in business. They set him up in politics. And if the poor Jews of the right, the true right in Israel, can't see that they're being co-opted by a phony right-wing president who's actually a globalist. And, of course, the Mossad has this seamless relationship with the dark side of the CIA. As I explained, Israeli industries are shoveling U.S. military technology into China's hands. That's where they get all their, top-of-the-line technology. And the Mossad has often done the stealth assassinations internationally for the CIA. And worse, it's Mossad Arab-controlled. They have, Israeli Arabs who are under control and been trained by the Mossad. They have been successful infiltrating Iran, infiltrating Iraq, infiltrating Syria at the highest levels. And they now run most of ISIS and the other rebel jihadist movements in Syria. In other words, that's how the Western globalists control these so-called brand new terrorist organizations like ISIS through Israeli Arab highly trained agents who are pretending to be jihadists. Now,
so
there's a lot of terrorists themselves that think that they're really anti-U.S., and they are. And they're growing all the time, but they don't realize that at the very highest levels in Jordan, in Israel, in Syria, that their leaders are Mossad-controlled agents.
Now, you have spoken in the past about Rand Paul, and I believe favorably. You think that he has something going for him?
Well, I'm very cautious. The only reason I can say it's favorable is that the powers that be don't want him. Okay, in other words, even though he's compromised for what appears to be benefit, his political benefit, he's very naive about that. He doesn't realize it's a one-way street. You can compromise and go campaign for Mitch McConnell, but you're never going to get anything in return for Mitch McConnell, and that's proven true. But it's kind of a slippery slope. Once you start compromising, and the Republican establishment keeps saying, yeah, you did good there, and then they get the Israeli establishment to come and back you as well, finance for you a trip to Israel and start getting you into all of these. Then remember, anybody who's running for president knows that the Israeli lobby is the most powerful lobby in the United States politically. And
absolutely, even unquestionably in our history.
Yeah. But they have to realize that the establishment isn't going to let them get the nomination. And if they do, like Mitt Romney, they'll defeat them at the polls, even if they have to make 8 million votes disappear, as they did in 2012.
Yeah, they sure did. Hold on a minute, Joe. We have to pause. We're running a little bit late. We'll come right back. Okay, and welcome back. Talking with Joel Skousen, as we do a couple of times a month, World Affairs Brief. Again, if you'd like a complimentary copy, just write to Joel at editor@worldaffairsbrief.com, and he will be happy to send you one. Tex Mars writes some very, very good material. His weekly newsletter is just out, and if it's all right, Joel, I'd like to read just a little bit to underscore what I was saying in relatively few words before the break. He writes about the 13 leading GOP candidates prepping for the presidential race. He says, as far as Israel goes, the candidates all give a yell, quote, "We love everything you do," end quote. Israel is, for these men, a saintly example of a nation full of perfected good men, led by an angel named Netanyahu. Rand Paul, son of Ron, brags that he is a stout defender of Israel. Rand says he has, quote, visits every day from the Jews. That's every day. It seems that Rand is going to do his best to keep Israel from being sullied by charges of genocide and ethnic cleansing. When it came out in the press recently that Palestine was considering taking up such charges with the International Criminal Court, Rand rushed in to the rescue. he introduced legislation that would punish Palestine for this indiscretion by having U.S. aid money cut off. Rand Paul's visits every day from the Jewish crowd reminds me, writes Tex Mars, of evangelist Billy Graham, who once told Larry King, host of CNN's Larry King Show, that each morning he consulted by phone with Rabbi Tannenbaum of New York. Said Billy Graham, the rabbi gives me spiritual direction every day. President Obama reportedly told Sarkozy of France that he, too, hears from the Jews every day, specifically from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, how that fits into the upcoming speech before Congress, we'll get some commentary by Joel in a moment. Imagine our president, the top evangelist in the world, and a U.S. senator consulting every day with Jewish overlords from a tiny nation of just 7 million people. There's no contact every day with red Chinese officials, 1 billion plus, or India, 1 billion plus, Indonesia, 250 million, or Brazil, 120 million. Only from teeny-weeny Israel. So little a nation that 5 Israelis would fit in one state of Texas. There's a little humor in there. Last thing, talks about Ted Cruz. Speaking of Texas, that state's Senator Ted Cruz, a gargantuan Israeli fan, flew to Israel to meet with officials and receive his marching orders twice in the 2 months just before he took office. He flew with Senator McConnell, I was right, now Majority Leader of the Senate, on McConnell's private jet. Cruz's wife, by the way, is employed by Goldman Sachs. Do we gag now or later? And his dad preaches pro-Zionism at churches all over South Texas. It goes on and on from there, but that's just a little quote from Tex Mars, and he ends up by mentioning how Sheldon Adelson, the billionaire Jew casino mogul in Las Vegas primarily, said that he had $100 million to donate to Republicans who backed Israel, which means every single one of them. Comments on that, Joel?
Well, first of all, there's some exaggeration there. Tex Mars thinks that the Jews are running everything, and they aren't. The globalists are running everything, and there are a lot of Jews among them, and there's a difference between it. It isn't a Jewish conspiracy for Jewishness' sake. It's a globalist conspiracy which attracts these
the Rothschild Zionists
unprincipled labor Zionists that are attracted to the halls of power. They're very bright, like Henry Kissinger and others.
Oh, they penetrated it to the hilt, absolutely.
But I'll tell you, Obama does not talk to Benjamin Netanyahu every day. He doesn't talk to hardly anyone every day, on a regular basis, because he's out of the loop. I mean, this man is not making the decisions. Now, as the National Security Advisor, Jim Jones admitted, they do get daily marching orders from Henry Kissinger and Associates. Not because it's a Jewish connection, because it's a globalist connection. And, he is a Jew, but he's first and foremost a globalist.
Correct.
But Rand Paul. Once you remember that there's this link between the Israeli secret services, the Shabak and the Mossad, and our dark side of the CIA. And so even Rand Paul would not take a daily briefing from the CIA. He would be suspicious of it. But he can get the same insider information, not knowing that it's from the same source, from people who now, because he's shown his allegiance to Israel, are it's payback time by giving him daily briefings on the state of the world. And a lot of people think, "Ooh, I'm privileged. I'm getting Mossad briefings. Because Israel does have a reputation for knowing a lot of this secret stuff, and they do because they're involved in so much.
Oh, you bet.
The dark side of government.
There's a bright side?
No. Well, there is a white side. It's smaller and smaller all the time, but they have to have a white side of the FBI and the CIA. To remember, they play both sides. The DEA both protects drug lords that are part of the CIA pipeline, and then fights against drugs. And DHS both supports terrorism and many
pretty damn silly,
and then fights against it. But that's what's so difficult for Americans to see what's going on, because the media can always.
How are they ever going to really wrap their minds around it when the media is so corrupt? I don't see it.
Well, that's why I say, even in the alternate media, in the internet, you have thousands of stories seeded per month from disinformation agents, and there's a lot of websites on our side of the political spectrum that are against globalism that get duped into explaining a lot of hype about economic collapse and a lot of hype about
doom predictions, prophecies constantly, and there are probably several thousand hardcore people whose job it is to ride and watch and influence as many alternative media, news sites, blogs, forums, comments, wherever there are comments allowed. Those people are at work. They love to start fights. They love to sully people. Yeah,
that's exactly right, Jeff. You can look at the commentary sections on Alex Jones' website, or the Mr. Duff of Veterans Today and all this stuff, and you can see where the government agents are playing these things. You can go to a chemtrail site, you can see the debunkers and the government agents there. They just ply the whole sector.
Our side is about as screwed up as the other side at this point, unfortunately.
I mean, I spend probably a third of my time in the World Affairs Brief debunking bad stories about conspiracy as I do trying to confirm the ones that are good, so that people can understand, how do you see through these things? How do you see the too good to be true information? Or how do you take apart an ISIS video and show why it's been staged rather than real? I mean, the latest one where they show these towering ISIS guys in black must be about 7'6". So, I mean, it's just ludicrous.
Yeah,
totally photoshopped and very sophisticated. And we're to believe that some jihadists in the middle of the desert of Syria are going to have this kind of capability? I don't think so. This is a Western intelligence operation.
It's really amazing when you think how allegedly smart these people are, that they would release such perfectly produced, contrived video when they could easily get an iPhone and go out and do the same kind of thing and give it a jerky, homemade feel, and would have far more credibility. But you're right, these are production numbers, and they're really embarrassing. It's stupid.
Well, but the American people are still buying into this, great ISIS threat.
Well, I hate to say this, but when our generation is gone, my friend, they'll have their way. The controllers will have their way, because the following generations, they don't have much. There's some wonderful exceptions, but and they are waking up, but they're really lacking in many ways.
But my feeling is that when you look at how many people disbelieve the government version of events on 9/11, it's astounding. It's a lot higher than what people think. In other words, and I talk to a lot of these people all the time, and they don't get the story straight, even though they disbelieve the government thing, because there's a lot of disinformation out there. But I think it's not just going to die off. I think when this next World War comes, they're going to finally have the excuse to take down dissidents in this nation and lock them up and dispose of them. And that's the whole reason.
I'm afraid you
NSA spying. That's the reason for militarization of police. Forget about foreign troops. Got enough thugs in this country to wrap up a lot of dissidents. So
you have a very important point, Joel, and that would include you and I, I'm afraid.
Well, it does. And if people see you and I disappearing, they ought to watch their back, because, it's not enough to say, well, that's not us, if we weren't radical and we didn't publish. But believe me, if they start taking down your leaders on the Internet who are trying to tell you the truth, then the common person's right behind. But I don't think they'll start this until war comes.
No, they're not going to push it. They'll do it in the chaos and the pain and the angst of war and the uncertainty and the panic. If you have a chance, look at the homepage at Rents and look at the splash art up at the top. I've got a picture of the NSA director, Mike Rogers. And I want you to look at the expression on his face. All right? If that doesn't scare you, nothing will. Okay? I'm real serious. It's a rather unflattering picture, but there's a message in there, and it is most unsettling. NSA. This guy is running the agency. Good God. Take a look. Joel, thank you so much for your contribution to this program and our network over here. As always, and I look forward to our next chat.
I just saw the picture, Jeff. Wonderful.
There it is.
With great confidence. Thanks so much. Good to be with you.
Okay, take care. Night. Okay, Joel Skousen, World Affairs Brief, and we'll be back with hour number 3 in just a few minutes.